It is decision time for Chris Grier in this Miami Dolphins front office. And on today's show, we are going to look at the top 10 free agents that were on the Dolphins roster in 2024. And I am going to act as Chris Grier, as this front office, letting y'all know on which players that I would re-sign and which players that I would let go walk in free agency. And we have to start with the number one player on the Dolphins that is a free agent and a top 3 free agent in general in this offseason, that being the safety Jevon Holland. And he is likely going to headline the free agency rumors for the Dolphins leading into that early March period. And I'm going to tell you right now, I am letting Jevon Holland walk. I would not re-sign Jevon Holland. I do not think it is worth it. He has regressed every single year of his career since he was a second-round pick out of Oregon 4 years ago. And with his inability to tackle and be physical in these late weather, cold weather games, must-win scenarios, I would look to a different direction at the safety room for the Miami Dolphins. He's been an okay coverage guy, but I mentioned it. He's gotten worse every single year. Like, the stats reflect that. But it's really the eye test as well. Like, how many times this year during a watch party for the Miami Dolphins, if you joined us for a watch party, did we say, oh, and Jevon Holland missed a tackle? Oh, him and Jordan Poyer missed a tackle. Like, to me, I just don't think Holland is ultimately going to be worth the contract that he gets. Now, if you would tell me that I could bring back Jevon Holland to this Dolphins roster for $15, $16 million per season, I'd be all in. But many people are projecting him to get close to $20 million per season. I just can't get down with that. The Pro Football Focus projected contract for Jevon Holland, 4 years, $98 million, 19.5 annual average salary. But also, Bleacher Report projecting a 4-year, $100 million deal for $20 million on annual average salary. Jevon Holland's a nice young player. I'm not denying that. He's 25. He's young. He's had a lot of experience. He's been solid in the NFL. But considering the Dolphins don't have the most cap space, considering they need other positions on this roster as well, allotting $18, $19, $20 million to Jevon Holland, who has been regressing over the past 2 or 3 seasons, would be a bad investment in my opinion, which is why I'm letting Jevon Holland walk. But what say you? Should the Dolphins re-sign Jevon Holland? If you want to keep Jevon in the 305, type those Ys. If you're like me and you're fine letting him walk to chase a bag in free agency, type those Ns. And guess what? I know it's a look ahead, but assuming he gets a big contract like that, you'll have a 3rd-round comp pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. All right, let's move over to the next man here, Calais Campbell, the defensive lineman who was a revelation for Miami in 2024. And it should be no surprise, and I would be stunned if any Dolphins fan out there had anything other than this to say. How could you not want to re-sign Calais Campbell? Seriously, the 37-year-old was signed super late into free agency. The Dolphins had a nice little bundle of cap space to use on vetman free agents after the initial wave in early April, late or after the draft and stuff like that. And they used it on Campbell, and it was a great move. He was terrific. He had 5 sacks. He had 52 tackles. Calais Campbell, who played college ball at Miami, he played for the Dolphins this season, was unbelievable. He helped mentor Chop Robinson. He helped be a leader in that locker room, leader on that defense. And the question is, will he ultimately want to return to the NFL and the Miami Dolphins? It was very clear that this could have been the last season for Calais Campbell. So we know that if you were to sign him, it would be a vetman contract in return, a 1-year, $3 million deal. So it's not going to cost you anything, which just adds to the reason why you should bring him back even more. But the question you have is, does he want to come back to Miami? Seriously, because if he wants to play one more season, wouldn't he want to play for a Super Bowl contending team? The Dolphins almost waived him if they were eliminated before the Week 18 game for the postseason so he could join a contender. I don't know if he'll want to return to the Dolphins, but if he would, I would absolutely re-sign Calais Campbell. Let's move over to another key defensive player here, Kader Kohou, the nickel corner for the Miami Dolphins, who's been on this team for the last 3 seasons after being a UDFA, but a great story for Miami. And unfortunately, I am going to let Kader Kohou walk. Now, I actually do think this was one of Kader's best seasons, and he had a bounce back year from last year because he was not good in 2023 under Vic Fangio, but had a better season in 2024. He had injury history and injury problems this season. He missed about 3 or 4 games this year, but he was pretty good in coverage in the slot. I got to be honest. He only allowed a completion percentage of 65.6%, had 3 PBUs and 2 interceptions, a lot of QB rating of just 76.0. Like the numbers that Kader Kohou flashed this year were actually pretty good. And when you look at specific nickel corners and only slot guys, there is about 15 to 25 nickel corners that only that qualified in terms of snaps played. Kader actually ranked in the top 12, top 15, the top half in terms of nickel and slot yardage allowed as corner. So he was pretty good in coverage. But the reason why I am ultimately letting Kader Kohou walk is because we need a kind of identity change at the cornerback room. We need more physicality. We need better tacklers in the run game because he was actually not that good this year. You looked at his missed tackle rate, pretty high. How many times did we see him try to come up in the run game and get ultimately pushed to the side? It's actually more than you would think, and I appreciate the effort from Kohou, and it's not his fault, but he's just such a smaller guy that it's hard for him to bring down these physical backs like James Cook, like Derrick Henry, like a Saquon, like a Josh Jacobs. So to me, I would like to maybe get a little bit more size at that nickel corner position, but I would not be upset if Kohou ultimately returned. Out of the 10 free agents that we're talking about today, I'm not going to lie, the hardest decision for me to make on this video was deciding whether to bring back Kader Kohou or let him walk, but I'm ultimately letting him go and maybe give Cam Smith another shot next season. Next up on the list is Liam Eichenberg, the offensive lineman. And, well, if you've been around the channel for an extended period of time, you don't even need to know what I'm thinking. I'm not thinking about it. I will kick him out the door myself. I will pack his bags. I will taxi him to the airport. Whatever I need to do to make sure that Liam Eichenberg is not a member of the Miami Dolphins in 2025, I will do. And if they do re-sign Liam Eichenberg and I have to be forced to make a video on Eichenberg re-signing with the Dolphins, I am going to be absolutely livid. I cannot fathom Eichenberg being on this football team another season. He sure could be argued as a decent depth guy because he knows the system and has experience, but I don't even want to deal with it because I've just seen him step into football games and struggle so much over the last 3-4 seasons where I need the Dolphins to wipe their hands clean of Eichenberg and move on. Get him away from this Dolphins football team. I'm begging. Well, make sure you are subscribed to the channel because on all 10 of these guys, if they go elsewhere, if they get re-signed, we will have you covered on what ultimately happens with these 10 Dolphins players. So join the channel today. Help us get to 68K subs. That's the next milestone here at the channel. Next man we got to talk about here is Tyrel Dodson, the linebacker who did not start 2024 with the Miami Dolphins, was on the Seattle Seahawks, and then was claimed by Miami off waivers after released by the Seattle Seahawks. And they liked Dodson so much that they released David Long Jr. in the corresponding move. And I would re-sign Tyrel Dodson. He's actually been someone that I labeled as a guy I'd like to retain for Miami's defense because he came onto the season late and did not get a lot of playing time, but I thought he made the most of his playing time for the Fins. He played in 5 games for Miami, started 3 of them, with Anthony Walker Jr. dealing with injuries down the end of the season, and I thought he played well. He wasn't as good in the run game as I kind of anticipated, but he made up for it for his ability to play in coverage. 36 tackles, you see the 3 interceptions, the 4 PBUs. He's got pretty decent speed. Him and Jordan Brooks kind of flashed that sideline to sideline ability, and I was a pretty big fan of those two working in tandem. Do I think it's the best linebacker duo of all time? No. But with Dodson's ability to cover in the pass game, which surprised me, I think those two can complement each other relatively well and create a nice dynamic duo at linebacker for a relatively cheap price. Like he, in the 5 games for the Dolphins last year, had an 85.6 coverage grade for the Dolphins. You saw the numbers. He had 3 interceptions, 4 PBUs. He was one of the highest graded linebackers in terms of pass defending over the last 5 or 6 weeks of the season. Jordan Brooks was unbelievable for Miami this year in both the run game and the pass game. If you get another version of Brooks in 2025 like that, and Dodson in a more expanded role, might be a pretty solid duo for the Miami Dolphins, and I would be intrigued with bringing him back. Now, the PFF projected contract is 2 years, $11 million, which isn't a lot, like 5.5 mil per season over 2 seasons isn't bad. I think you might be able to get him cheaper than that. I've kind of projected a 2-year, $9 million deal, and although Dodson was good down the stretch for Miami, let's not forget he was released halfway through the year by Seattle. So does he really have enough kind of, I guess, want and market around the league to get 5.5 mil per season? Maybe, but I think Miami might be able to get him for 2 years, $9 million, which is a deal I would absolutely make for Dodson to be your second linebacker, or heck, maybe you draft one and he becomes your third guy. All right, we got 5 more names to get to, but we are sponsored by Prize Picks, the #1 daily fantasy sports platform in North America. I play Prize Picks on a daily basis, and I need y'all to join me and the millions of others. It's so easy to play. All you do is pick more or less than at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. And with the big game almost here, don't miss out on the last football game of the season with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the big game. Prize Picks is also giving away a free pick for the game, where Patrick Mahomes will only need to throw 1 yard to win. If you're correct on at least one more stat projection, you can win real cash. You can also check out the promos tab to tell any of the Prize Picks Super Sweat Millie winners for the big game. If you tell a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can split $1 million in promo funds. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. You unlock that when you download the app and use code CLNS. One more time, download the app and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Let's move back over to the offensive side of the field here and talk about Robert Jones, an impending free agent. He was an interior offensive lineman for Miami. Started at the left guard spot for the majority of this season. And like Liam Eichenberg, I am letting Robert Jones walk. There's no surprise here from the Dolphins fans that know my thought process on this roster and how they should address the offseason. The biggest need for this team is overhauling the interior offensive line. You have your right tackle in Austin Jackson. You have Aaron Brewer at safety. You have your left tackle, whether it's Armstead returning or Patrick Paul, who you drafted in the second round last year. But you need to get the left guard and the right guard spot figured out to protect Tua and improve your run game. Robert Jones just simply is not it. I'm finding a new left guard for 2025. Let's move over to the other starting safety from last season, which was Jordan Poyer. Him and Jevon Holland just simply did not do as well as I would have hoped, and I'm letting Jordan Poyer walk. So I'm letting both Jevon Holland and Jordan Poyer go somewhere else in free agency. And I've said this multiple times. I am completely overhauling the safety room. I am fine having the 6th-round pick from last year, Patrick McMorris, be your third safety. Out of Cal, I know the Dolphins organization likes McMorris, but I'd like to sign one in free agency on a relatively mid-level, cheap contract, and I would like to draft one in the first 2 or 3 rounds of the draft as well. Poyer just simply was not good enough this past season. He was not a good tackler. He got cooked in coverage. I'll never forget the game against the Arizona Cardinals. I don't care if he had 17 interceptions after that game, how badly he got cooked by Trey McBride in that collapse of the fourth quarter that Miami had, which ultimately kept them out of the postseason, by the way, if you really think about it. If they didn't blow that double-digit lead to Arizona at home in Week 8, they probably make the postseason at 9-8. Poyer was not good at any stretch or any level of this defense. I'm changing the entire safety room. I'm letting Poyer go. How about Emanuel Ogbah, the edge who was signed just days before free agent or training camp started since Shaq Barrett retired? Ogbah got a large role for the Dolphins defense, which was not expected, and I would bring him back if he wanted to. I really would. Ogbah surprised me this past season. As I mentioned, was signed super late due to Shaq Barrett retiring unexpectedly. Bradley Chubb never returned this season. Jalen Phillips got hurt in week 4, and he was out for the season. So you had to rely on Chop Robinson, Emanuel Ogbah, Tyus Bowser, Quentin Bell, Calais Campbell a lot of the season. I thought Ogbah was fine. He had 5 sacks. I mean, he's never been known for being someone good in the run game, but in terms of being a situational pass rusher and a good depth piece, I would absolutely do it. And if you're re-signing Emmanuel Ogbah for like a cheap, maybe like 1 year, $3 million deal, or 2 years, $6 million, or 2 for 8 to be your 4th pass rusher on this team behind Chop, Bradley Chubb, and Jalen Phillips, I would have absolutely no issues doing that. I'd bring back Emmanuel Ogbah. Do you agree with me, though? Should the Dolphins re-sign Ogbah? Type S if you would sign him back to this Dolphins roster in free agency. Type P if you would pass. Let me know your thoughts on Emmanuel Ogbah down in the comment section. We're going to stay on the defensive line with an interior guy, Benito Jones, the longtime veteran who got his first glimpse of big playing time in 2024 for the Miami Dolphins. And like Ogbah, I thought he was impressive in rotation, man. I am bringing Benito Jones back. His big body was active a lot for Miami. I thought he was decent in the run game. And even though I have said interior defensive line is a need for Miami, it's more or less because I want a long-term solution next to Zach Sealer and a long-term replacement for Zach as well, potentially, if his contract doesn't get extended over the next 2 seasons. He was pretty decent in spots. It's not like he's a starting 3-tech or a 1-tech. It's not that. But to be that third guy behind Zach Sealer and potentially if a draft or a sign guy, you have it a bigger contract earlier in the offseason, yeah, I would be fine with Benito Jones being your third defensive tackle. You need depth at that position. He worked as the third guy behind Campbell and Sealer in 2024. I'd bring him back to be your third guy once again for 2025. Last free agent we're going to talk about here, Isaiah Wynn. He rounds out our list today, an offensive lineman who did not get a lot of playing time due to his return from injury, but got some PT in the last 5 weeks of the season. I'm actually going to re-sign Isaiah Wynn. That might shock some people because I've wanted a complete overhaul of this offensive line room, but I see no downside in bringing Wynn back because I know it's going to be for cheap because he did not play last year for the most part due to his injury return, and it's not like he was some all-Pro Bowl type guy in the 5 games that he played for Miami in his return, so there's not going to be that much of a market for Isaiah Wynn. And he's so versatile to where it would help Miami. I don't want him to start by any stretch of the imagination. Not to start, but to be the backup interior offensive lineman to whoever starts at left guard and right guard. Yeah, I am fine with that. But also gives you flexibility because he has experience playing offensive tackle in the past. So if someone gets hurt, he could kick out to right tackle. He could kick out to left tackle in spot situations. Is he going to be a stud when he comes in? No, but it is a pretty solid depth piece on the offensive line. I would bring back Isaiah Wynn because it is going to be extremely cheap, so why not keep him around in this locker room? All right, that will do it for today's show. As I mentioned earlier, on these free agents, if something happens, they go somewhere else, they re-sign with the Miami Dolphins, we will have you covered with a video and break it all down. So join us here at Dolphins Today because we're putting out daily content surrounding the Miami Dolphins.